Hi friends! In today's episode, we'll be talking more about winter hay feeding, monitoring your feed and waste, and how to determine if you're meeting the nutrient requirements for your goats. I'll go through the process I use to evaluate our hay feeding and how to make changes if things aren't working the way you planned. This one's loaded with details, so grab a pencil and let's jump in. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey there! Do you want to hang out with like-minded folks who are also interested in raising their own livestock and seeking self-sufficiency? Inside the free Raising Goats and Homestead Livestock community, you'll get tips on raising goats and other livestock and ideas to increase your self-sufficiency. Join now at bit.ly/getgoatwisecommunity. You can also become an insider and get weekly emails from me with the latest podcast episode, tips on raising goats and other livestock, real-life information about self-sufficiency and living off-grid, and early bird access to special offers. Sign up at bit.ly/getgoatwiseinsider. We are getting closer to opening up our direct meat sales, and you'll want to make sure you're on the insider's email list so you'll be the first to know when it opens up. And I think there might be some special savings just for listeners of the podcast. Yesterday, we finished the roof on the building. It's a relief to have that part done because roofing in the winter is not fun and a little risky. We had to have it finished yesterday because our oldest daughter, who is our major fence and building helper, left this morning for a great adventure with some friends. That means it's up to Stacy, Ray, and I to get some framing done this week. But the pressure's off now that the roof is on, and I have a lot of work to catch up on, so maybe that will be what happens this week. Goats are doing great. It's been near zero every morning except for today, and it was right about freezing with the south wind bringing in some warm air this morning. There have been a lot of questions about hay and winter feeding, and episode 28, Winter Feed for Livestock, is quickly becoming one of my most downloaded episodes. We're about a quarter to a third of the way through our hay feeding season, and I need to evaluate how we're doing, so I thought I'd share how I do that. The reason I give a range of how far we are into feeding season is because I don't know how long winter will hold on, when the snow will melt, and when we'll have green grass to put the goats out on. Sometime between early May and late June. For the does, right now the goal is to maintain. Around the 20th of this month, we'll increase their feed amount to prep them for breeding when we put the bucks in a week later. Breeding date isn't set in stone yet. We're still looking at our late May, early June schedule to make sure I'll be here when they start kidding. It will definitely be December 28th or later. If you want to learn more about why we breed at that time, you can listen to episode 14, and I'll link that in the show notes. The does are fed on a feed row every day. Positive side of that is that they clean up the feed and there's very little waste, less than 2%. The downside of that is that there's a higher risk of parasites when we have to feed in the same place that they just ate the day before. Another pro is that without fixed feeders in place, we can feed them outside the night trap on the snow in a different place every day. This eliminates the parasite issue and adds organic matter to our soil where we feed. We have enough snow to do that, so as soon as Sage gets back from her little trip, we will start feeding out on the snow. As far as feed consumption, our doe's average weight is about 120 pounds. Remember, we've talked about feed consumption as 3 to 4% of body weight. So to calculate our feed consumption, we take 120 pounds and I always go conservatively, so we'll times that by 4%. So we'll estimate that they're eating 4.8 pounds of dry matter per day. Our hay is 88% dry matter, so we'll divide 4.8 pounds dry matter by 88% to get 5.45 pounds per day as fed hay that they're eating. Our bales are a sandfoin grass mix and weigh 1,716 pounds on average. We're feeding between a quarter and a third bale per feeding, or about 500 pounds. There are 96 does in the pen, 95 goats plus Perry, the cart goat in training. 500 pounds divided by 96 goats is 5.2 pounds per head per day average that we are feeding. This is a little less than the 4% of body weight calculation that came out 5.45 pounds. Expected consumption is 3 to 4% of body weight, so let's calculate 3% to see if we're in the range. 120 pounds times 3% is 3.6 pounds dry matter divided by 88%, the dry matter of our hay, to get 4.09 pounds as fed for the low end of the range. 5.2 pounds per head per day is in the upper end of the 3 to 4% range. Dry does, that means they're not lactating, and does in early pregnancy have the lowest nutritional requirements of any production phase. Based off the NRC recommendations and adjusted for the weight of our does, these goats need 0.36 pounds of protein per day. Other sources say that this size goat in this production phase only needs 0.2 pounds of protein per day. Why the big difference? First, there's not a lot of funding for researching goats, so sometimes the data is extrapolated from sheep research or it's done on a small number of animals and just isn't very reliable. The requirement will vary by breed and body composition as well, so heavily muscled goats will naturally have a higher protein requirement. These does are moderately muscled, so I'm confident we'd be meeting their needs if we're close to 0.36 pounds of protein. Another reason for the wide range in recommended requirements could be that goats are very efficient nitrogen recyclers, so they excrete less nitrogen and actually recycle it back into the rumen, where the rumen microbes utilize it and create microbial protein, which is available to the animal as the microbes pass through the digestive system. I'm not sure how much research has been done in this area, but I'll be looking into it more. Last year, our hay tested at 14% crude protein on a dry matter basis. So with the amount we are currently feeding, 5.2 pounds as fed, times 88%, that's 4.58 pounds of dry matter, times 14% crude protein in the hay, that's 0.64 pounds of protein. We are definitely meeting their protein need based on these numbers. We could start feeding a lower protein hay along with our current hay to meet their nutrient requirements and save on cost. Protein is the most expensive nutrient to feed. More importantly, how do they look? They're doing really well. The thinner does are gaining condition, and the does that weren't as thin are maintaining or gaining slower. They're exactly where we want them at this point. If you want to know more about monitoring your goat's condition, you can listen to episode 29 about body condition scoring goats. How about the kids? Well, the goal for the kids is to gain weight. We're working toward a goal weight of 80 pounds for market. Unlike the does, we are bale feeding the kids. What that means is that we put bales out in the pen and they have free access to all they want to eat. We do monitor this closely because of potential for waste. They're getting the same hay that the does get, just in full bale form. We put 4 bales in at a time, and again, the bales weigh average 1,716 pounds. The last set of 4 bales lasted 23 days, feeding 100 kids. To monitor the waste, we'll calculate the average feed per day and then compare it to the expected consumption based on weight. 4 bales times 1,716 pounds as fed is 6,864 pounds as fed. That divided by 100 goats is 68.64 pounds per goat, divided by 23 days is 2.98 pounds per head per day as fed. Average weight of the kids is 60 pounds, times 4% is 2.4 pounds per head per day dry matter, Expected consumption. Divide that by 88% dry matter, it's 2.73 pounds per head per day as fed. We're feeding 2.98 pounds per head minus 2.73 pounds they're consuming, so estimated waste is 0.25 pounds per head per day. 0.25 divided by 2.98, the amount we're feeding, is 8.4% waste. That is very good. Maybe too good. So they might not be eating as much as I thought, or they weigh a little less than I estimated. Either way, I'm happy because we're not wasting a huge amount of hay, and they're growing very well. If the waste had been higher, say 15% or greater, then we would probably change our feeding strategy to lower the waste, likely going to a feed row with them, just like the does. Protein requirement for maintenance for a 60-pound goat is 0.23 pounds per day. Let's add protein for growth to gain 0.33 pounds per day. That will require an extra 0.09 pounds per day of protein. 0.23 plus 0.09 equals 0.32 pounds of protein for maintenance and growth. Back to a dry matter basis, if they're consuming 2.4 pounds per day of hay times 14% protein, then they're getting 0.34 pounds of protein, which gives them everything they need to grow as fast as they can without supplemental grain. We are not wasting protein, and our feeding is optimized for maximum growth. Cost of gain will be acceptable, though we will have to add more hay to our storage as I wasn't planning on feeding 100 kids most of the winter. Why are we still feeding kids? In years past, they've gone to the sale barn in mid-November. This year, we're working toward a direct-to-consumer product that will be available soon, and I'll share more about that process and how we decided to go that route in another episode. It's a ton of work, but I'm confident it will be worth it. I know that was a lot of numbers. I hope it helped you understand how we monitor the hay feeding and waste throughout the feeding season. Remember, feed is your most expensive input in raising livestock, so knowing how much you're feeding and what is getting wasted is very important in making the most of your resources. If you have questions, head on over to the community and post them there, and I'll get them answered as quickly as possible. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.